This week on the WriterCon podcast.
Gosh, I think if I had just one piece of advice, I would say write. I know that seems really, really basic, but it seems to me that, after having done this for decades, the thing that I have to keep coming back to remind myself that is the most important is sit down and do the work. Just sit down and do the work. When you hate what you're doing, sit down and do the work. When you love what you're doing, sit down and do the work. And I think the more you do that, the better you're going to get.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich. Hey there, writers. Thanks for joining us again. This is our first podcast for December, and I know at my house, people are already they started exchanging Christmas lists around August, I think. So I will ask my friends on the podcast here to help those of you listening do your Christmas shopping. And of course, all I care about are books. Is there a book? Maybe something totally obvious. Nobody gets to give their own books for gifts, but is there a gift that you like or are thinking about giving or that you would recommend as a Christmas gift? Lara, how about you?
I usually give books to my nieces and nephews. So I just check in to see where they're at in their current interests or where they're at in the series that they like, and I'll pick up the next one, and then I'll get usually something that goes along with it, something that's tied to the book in some way, a theme, or if there's like pajamas with the characters on it, something like that, to give it a little extra fun Christmas spin to it as well. I know you said we don't give our own gifts, but I actually had someone at work recently discover that I read books and asked me to please bring a set because he has a reader in mind that he wants to gift my set of books to for Christmas. It was a surprise. Nice. He just came barreling in and was like, I just found out you write books. So it's lovely.
But do you have a particular book that you like to give as a gift, or one you think everybody ought to read, or something like that?
One book that everybody ought to read?
That doesn't have your name on it.
No,
Jesse, how about you? What do you like to give?
Yeah.
Well, normally I just ask the person if, again, I know a lot of readers already. Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's something weird, especially I feel like today it'd be weird to be like, I bought you this book. I think you're going to like it. Here. Now it's going to take up space in your house. And so I would try to gauge first if I think they will like it or if it's from an author they already like. If anyone watching or listening would like to buy me a Hanukkah present, you are welcome to buy one of the incredibly beautiful leather-bound versions of Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archives. They go for like $200 each. They're gorgeous. I can't afford them yet, but they are beautiful. And I think
he should give us one. As much publicity as we've given him.
Listen, Brando, I know you're listening. I know your people are listening. Send me a book.
What about you? What about you, Bill? What do you think is the one go-to perfect Christmas gift book?
The book I've given more often than any other, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, is The Princess Bride by William Goldman.
I knew it. I was going to try to guess before, and I was like, it's going to be The Princess Bride.
But go with me, because I know a lot of people have seen the movie. And if you've seen the movie and then go to the book, which is very different, you may not get what you're expecting. If, on the other hand, you're me and you'd read the book many times before the movie came along, to me, the movie was like, kind of a sitcom version of the best parts of the book. But the original book by William Goldman is this wonderful kind of, it was metafictional before I think people were tossing that word around like they do now. And it's even got this introduction that involves him and his wife and his son, except the thing is, he doesn't actually have a son. He has two daughters. And he asked his daughters, what should my next book be about? And one said a princess and one said a bride, which is where the title came from. And it talks about his wife, the psychiatrist. He doesn't have a wife who's a psychiatrist. None of this is true. He's just got enough facts in there to make it real when he starts telling you about this book he loved as a kid by S. Morgenstern, and how now he's going to give you the good parts version, and goes on and on with this basically extended in-joke that fills the function. In the movie, they do it with Peter Falk, the uncle, and that's cute but shorter, but it's not nearly as interesting as I just say, if you haven't seen the book, if you haven't seen the movie, go read the book first, okay? Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Todd Fahnestock, the multiple best-selling author of many fantasy novels. While he was still attending Colorado College, he published his first 2 short stories, which, Jesse, were in TSR's Dragonlance anthologies. I know you know what that is. And then in 2006, he started writing longer work. He's since published the best-selling book, The Wishing World, which kicked off a new series. His new book is Charlie Fiction, a time travel urban fantasy novel involving a vengeful ghost and an how do you say that? Amnesiac time jumper. I mean, time travel would be bad enough, but if you can't even remember anything when you get there, that's got to be right. Anyway, that's what it's about. He's going to somehow save the world. We're going to talk to Todd about that and so much more. But first, the news. I chose our first news story for 2 important reasons. 1, it involves Substack, just like our WriterCon newsletter. And 2, it involves James Patterson. And I know anytime I have an excuse to mention James Patterson, Jesse will be happy about this. Well, James Patterson has launched a Substack newsletter.
Has he, or does he have his people doing it?
Well, how would you know at this point?
That's true.
But it's James Patterson Unfiltered, this best-selling author who, by the way, now has 480 million books in print, has decided to launch a Substack newsletter called Hungry Dogs. The first issue's out. I got it. I read it. And the reason Patterson, who is himself 77 years old, is now starting a Substack is because he's had trouble getting his opinion pieces into major newspapers, rather, and that sometimes he can't say what he wants to say in Hollywood, and he's bumped up against other people with strong viewpoints, and he just wants the idea of, as he says, not having to work for anybody, no editors, no Hollywood producers. I want to do it and do it well and talk about things. Some of his topics, it looks like, are going to be book banning. You'll recall he was upset when his book was banned in Florida, just as one of mine was. And he wants to talk about the importance of education, which is terrific. I just can't help but notice that we launched our Substack WriterCon newsletter, and now he's doing one. I mean, is this guy just going to copy everything we do, Jesse? What do you think?
It's annoying that he keeps copying things and then making more money from it than we are.
Yes, that's right.
He's like that people
Absolutely.
on... Yeah.
He probably got more subscribers the first day than we'll have in our lifetime. But yeah.
Yeah. Again, while I hate his ghostwriting factor that he has, I am glad if he is going to use his Substack to talk about the issues he care about, which are issues I also care about, which is education, book banning, whatnot. So good for him in that regard. And I'm glad he's actually writing. That's nice. So
yes. If you're wondering about the title, Hungry Dogs, he says that comes from his grandmother, who used to tell him that hungry dogs run faster. It's $6 a month or $50 for a year. You'll get opinion pieces, and he's also promising interviews with people like former President Bill Clinton and David Baldacci. We've had him, but we haven't had Clinton. How could we get Clinton on our podcast?
That's a good question. He's got emails people. I just hope they answer.
Yeah. Do you have any friends, Lara? Do you know anybody in the Clinton family or anything, or the Patterson family, for that matter?
Not to my knowledge. I think he might.
All right. And if you just don't think that sounds perfect for you, I got to remind you that the WriterCon newsletter, which also contains the WriterCon magazine, is free. So just go to Substack and subscribe and get a wealth of information to help you with your writing career. News story number 2, another huge major light, John Grisham has caused some controversy. Let me just say before I even start this story that I slightly know John Grisham. We've worked on a couple projects together, and I think he is a prince. So in no way is this story intended to be critical. Instead, it's more like a cautionary tale, like a Smokey the Bear announcement or something like that. Here's what's happened. The New York Times and ProPublica, the fact-checking website, are now asking Grisham to make changes to the attributions in his most recent nonfiction book, which is called Framed: Astonishing True Stories of Wrongful Convictions. As some people might know, he's written nonfiction at least once before, An Innocent Man, which was about a case set in Oklahoma, which was clearly a wrongful conviction, and he stayed with that. He serves on boards. He is involved with the Innocence Project, so this is a subject he knows about. But the Times and ProPublica are saying he went too far in his use of their reporting on a murder case in Texas, and they want changes made. Just to be clear, nobody's saying plagiarism. Nobody's saying libel or any of the things writers normally get sued for. They, I guess, just want more footnotes or more mention in the bibliography, although the book does already acknowledge. In this case, there was a 2-part series written by a very well-respected criminal justice reporter, Pamela Koloff, who has worked jointly for both the Times and ProPublica, which is why they're the ones bringing the website. And she reported on the now very disputed conviction of a man named Joe Bryan, who was found guilty of his wife's murder in 1985, even though there is evidence indicating that he was 120 miles away when it took place. Well, Bryan died, sadly, about a month ago, so some of this is academic, but that doesn't address the issue being raised in this website about the book. Let me give you an example. There are several of these, but here's one. In Koloff's original series, here's the sentence. Her pink nightgown was drawn up to the top of her thighs, and she was naked from the waist down. But here's the sentence in Grisham's work, which basically swaps the two independent clauses. She was naked from the waist down, and her pink nightgown was pulled up to her thighs. You see the similarity. I don't think it constitutes plagiarism, which people normally define as 3 or 4 or more words the same. They've changed the words a little, and they've reversed the order of the clauses, but obviously the author of version 2 saw version 1. So, Laura, of course, I would go to you for a legal opinion because that just makes sense. Do you think John Grisham has done anything wrong here?
Oof. So I actually have to discuss plagiarism in class that I teach. And in addition to when we present to writers at conferences, but I'm not going to say wrong. I do think it is the complaint that wasn't properly quoted and attributed to something else. If so,
that's a good question, because I was looking into that when I prepared this story, and all I can see is that they're asking in changes to attribution. And now I am speaking as a lawyer. I mean, that's not even a cause of action. You can sue somebody for plagiarism. You can sue somebody for libel, but inadequate attribution, I'm not sure that's even a thing. Maybe they're saying he exceeded fair use, but I don't know of anybody who ever said, well, you need to mention us more in the bibliography or add more footnotes or something.
If I saw something that similar in a paper that I was grading, I would probably direct the student to do a better job of quoting, putting it in quotes and
Yeah, make it a quote.
and then,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Make it a quote and then indicate where it came from in your works cited, your references. So,
Well, that wasn't the only example, but that's by way of it, just to toss one out there. Jesse, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh boy. I mean, if you're gonna use somebody's material, research, whatever, as a source, you have to, one, there are like AP whatever rules for how to source things, but also like make it clear that you did that and that you're not stealing it, that you're using it as inspiration. That's what authors' intros are for and whatnot. So it feels like it's one of the things where he just didn't do enough giving credit to people and is now just getting defensive because people are attacking him.
All right.
As we all do.
So here's the Smokey the Bear PSA that I'm sending out to all the writers listening to this, because, when you're writing nonfiction, you have to dig up facts. And that's basically Grisham's response. He's saying what we reported are facts. Nobody owns facts. And that's true. I know it can be frustrating for nonfiction writers who may spend 6 months digging up a fact only to see somebody else repeat it. That's frustrating. But whether you discovered the fact or not, you still don't own it. But here's what you should do, writers. Don't copy. Make it your own. Sometimes people think, well, if I change every sixth word or flip the clauses, that makes it your own. It doesn't. You've got a big vocabulary. Rewrite it and make it your own. And for heaven's sake, when you're making your bibliography, be generous. Err on the side of inclusiveness, right? Okay. Well, today in Craft Corner, we have Desiree Duffy, a longtime friend of this podcast. She, of course, runs Black Chateau and Books That Make You. She is the go-to expert on the subject of book marketing. And since we're rapidly approaching the new year, she's going to offer some tips on marketing your book in the coming year, in the new year. Take it away, Desiree.
Craft Corner.
When people ask me, what is the number one thing that I can do marketing-wise to ensure the success of my book? I tell them, write a good one. Here's the deal. The secret to your book's marketing success is crafting an engaging, page-turning, well-written, captivating story or idea. Whether it be fiction or nonfiction, that's what sets your book up for marketing success. I often say, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make them drink. Marketing can lead people to your book, but if it doesn't grab them, nothing that I do will make them buy it. Here are the key points to making sure your book is engaging right from the beginning. First of all, that first chapter. Heck, I actually like to work it backward. The first page, the first paragraph, all the way to that very first sentence needs to make them want to keep reading on. If they don't, why would they want to buy your book? The description, what they read when they flip around to the back cover or the Amazon description or any retail description, that's also the key to making them want to grab that copy. Punchy, poignant descriptions that answer the question, what will I get out of this book? That's what you're going for. We are human beings, and as human beings, we are all a little bit selfish. We always want to know what's in it for me, and that's what you need to convey to your potential reader. The other thing, the cover, the title, adhering to genre expectations, the look and the feel should promise the reader something as well. Don't go against genre expectations, or if you do so at your own risk. You don't want to confuse the reader. And above all else, please be professional in your cover design, especially if you're an indie author or self-publishing. Here's what you can do. Assess your book just like the reader does. What happens when you hold up your book? How does that title, the cover design, that back cover description, or maybe any blurbs, the author bio, what does that convey to the reader? What's it tell them about what is in it for them? When they flip to that first chapter and begin reading, what keeps them hooked from beginning to end to make them want to keep reading and therefore buy your book? I'm Desiree Duffy, founder of Black Chateau, the Book Fest, and Books That Make You. Thank you to William Bernhardt and WriterCon for inviting me to share this for you and for everything that you do for the writing community.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Now let's talk to Todd Fahnestock. Todd, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. Okay, traditional first question. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Gosh, I think if I had just one piece of advice, I would say write. I know that seems really, really basic, but it seems to me that, after having done this for decades, the thing that I have to keep coming back to remind myself that is the most important is sit down and do the work. Just sit down and do the work. When you hate what you're doing, sit down and do the work. When you love what you're doing, sit down and do the work. And I think the more you do that, the better you're going to get. I have a great story on that. So you want me to tell you this really quick anecdote? Okay. So once I was listening to Jodie Thomas, who's this fantastic author, and she was talking about how sometimes the muse is singing to you, right? And you're just like, everything's coming and your writing brilliance is just all flowing from your fingertips. And sometimes it feels like you're just mucking out a horse stall. It's like everything is horrible. And she said that at one point she decided that she was going to just keep writing through the horse stall mucking process as well as the angels singing. And then when she got done after 2 months, she was just going to go back and remove all the bad stuff. And she said what she discovered was she went back and she couldn't find the bad stuff. So her takeaway from that was your writing skill goes on an angle like this. If you keep writing, it will keep getting better and better and better. Your emotions about your writing go like this. So,
Yes.
My advice is just write. Get back to the keyboard and keep writing.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, you worked a lot of jobs before you got to publishing stories or books.
I
including,
did.
Here's the one that stood out for me. You were a video arcade manager in Durango. I only mention this because Lara and I go to Durango almost every year. We've got a family cabin out there, but I can't. Where's the video arcade?
Well, you have to remember, we're talking ancient history. I mean, you say video arcade attendant. I mean, come on. How long has it been since we've had video arcades at all? Right. So this was back, when was that? 1990, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
So it was in the Durango Mall out there in Bodo Park, or what was once known as Bodo Park.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
used to have a cool sheet music shop. I loved that. But go on.
I loved that mall. That was clearly it was my favorite mall. I was an attendant there, and so it was Bally's Aladdin's Castle, and I came in as this little neophyte. That was actually, interestingly, where I first was recommended reading Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which is my favorite novel of all time. I love that novel, and that was where I first picked it up. And I learned how to play Cyberball, which, those of you who play Call of Duty and all these newfangled, Assassin's Creed, they probably have never even heard of Cyberball. But one of my greatest accomplishments is that I went in, I watched this guy who was an expert Cyberball player, and I worked there for 6 months. And by the time I left, on my last day, this guy who was a college student locally came back into play and played me, and I beat him by 3 points. It was one of the greatest victories of my whole life.
Sounds well, and I know you love board games too, but we'll get to that in just a second.
Well, were you thinking about writing back then when you were that long ago? How long have you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah. So that would have been when I was 20, and I started my very first novel when I was 18 years old. I was in my independent study class in my senior year of high school, and I loved reading fantasy novels. I was a big Terry Brooks fan, still am, of course. Piers Anthony, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, Dragonlance novels. I loved all of that stuff. And even through that, I was like, I want to write a fantasy novel with more action in it. That was my thing. I wanted more action in my fantasy novel. And it's interesting that now my brand is edge of your seat epic fantasy. So I stuck to that. That was something that was important to me back then, still important to me now.
Yeah, fantastic. So now you've written a book called Falling to Fly, right? And
yes.
That's nonfiction. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's this. I've got one right in front of me here. This one right here. The book to read before you give up on your writing dream. And essentially,
nice.
The great story about this book, it's not like the other how-to writing books out there. It was supposed to be, and I utterly failed to write a writing how-to book, which I think goes really well with the title, Falling to Fly. Essentially, this story, it was supposed to be everything I knew about constructing story and writing story, and I was putting it together. But one of my favorite writing how-to books is Stephen King's On Writing. And he starts off, like, it's split into two components. On Writing is Stephen King's thing. And the first one is what he calls his CV, and the second one is what he calls his toolbox. And the first one is all these anecdotes from his life that talk about, how he came to be the writer that he is. And he starts off by saying, this is not an autobiography, and then proceeds to write an autobiography. I thought that was really slick. Like, he's like, this is not an autobiography. This is my CV. This is my curriculum vitae.
That.
And it was totally an autobiography, but but I love that part of it the most. So I wanted to tell what I knew about writing in stories. And so these anecdotes from my life, and when I learned how to, stick to it when it comes to writing and get my butt in the chair and write, when I learned to create character arcs, when I learned to, appreciate other people's structures, like Save the Cat, right? So I started off with that in mind, and what it ended up being was more of an inspirational. I go into, it's like, have you ever read Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, where he kind of goes behind the scenes of his progress as a cook? Well, anyways, if you haven't, you should read it. It's a fabulous book. But this is like Kitchen Confidential for the publishing industry. I talk about all of my failures. Yeah. All of my successes, all the places I fell on my face. It really is 90% me falling on my face in this book, which I think people appreciate, right?
Falling to fly.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's what it ended up being. And I almost scrapped the project. I almost threw it away because it was nothing like what I wanted. And my assistant, the wonderful Becca Gardner, she was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, this didn't end up the way that I wanted it to be. So I'm going to scrap this project. I'm going to pull maybe 30% of it and use it. And she's like, no. And that was the first time she'd ever gone, no. And I was like, what do you mean, no? She's like, no. This is exactly what it needs to be. This book is the book that every reader or every writer needs to read. I'm like, no, it's a scrubby, crappy version of what I was trying to do. She's like, yeah, but you did something different. You did something you weren't expecting to do, but it's so impactful to me. Now, here's what I want you to do. She's like, I tell you what, if you think I'm wrong and I think I'm right, let's get together 6 of your super fans. We'll get them on a Zoom call, and we'll put you on the Zoom call, but you will be muted and your screen will be blacked out. You don't get to respond, and we get to have them read it before they get on the call and then talk about it. And she did that, and every single one of them loved it. And that was the first time I've ever been like, okay, I guess I'll keep it. And the rest is history. So
yeah, that's a partner you need to keep forever.
For sure.
Now, we got to talk about your fiction because you've been such a phenomenally successful fiction writer. You've just released your 5th book in the Eldros fantasy series, and it's not even your first series, right?
No.
Tell us about the new book, though.
Yeah, so the new one is this book here, Bane of Giants. I'm not sure if that's actually focusing up on that, but whatever.
We can see it.
Yeah, okay. So Bane of Giants is the 5th and final in the Eldros Legacy of Shadows storyline. Now, Eldros Legacy is this fantastic collective where we pulled 4 different founding authors and about 10 other cohort authors to write in this world. There were 5 different continents. 4 of them were founded by the 4 founders. And then the cohort authors chose which continents they wanted to write in. And it's this big kind of collaborative project. And my story is the first one to be completed in its entirety. And the other stories are still in progress right now. So that's what Eldros Legacy is. The first book in Eldros, in my storyline of Eldros Legacy, starts with Khyven the Unkillable. And it's just this fantastic sword and sorcery romp through a world that used to be ruled by these 15-foot tall, highly intelligent, highly magical giants until about 2,000 years ago, when humans learned how to use magic and overthrew their overlords. Well, the giants, 50% of them were killed, 50% of them fled and magically vanished. And the story opens up when they've decided it's time for them to take back their world. And so this group of heroes, this group of 5 sort of Dungeons and Dragons style heroes, we've got a warrior, a rogue, a ranger, a paladin, and a magic user that are all from different walks of life, come together to stop the end of the world. So that's the beginning of the Eldros Legacy, and Bane of Giants is the culmination of that storyline.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Now, what does a typical writing day look like for you? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you want me to tell you what the typical ideal writing day is for me, or what is an actual typical
real
one? Okay.
My answers would also differ, but I think it's inspirational for our listeners, many of whom are aspiring writers, to hear what it's really like.
Outstanding. Well, so today I got up, I walked 5 miles in the snow. That's part of my routine. I kind of clear my head. I start thinking about ideas. I talk with my assistant. She's very good when it comes to bouncing ideas off of her, and I help her with any questions she has about her writing that she's starting to take off. You watch. Becca Lee Gardner is going to be one of the people on this podcast pretty soon. Keep an eye on her. Anyways, then I got back. I did 20-minute HIIT workout, high intensity interval training workout, then showered, had my breakfast, watched about a quarter of a movie. I try and get my brain in the mode of storytelling, so I always watch movies while I'm making breakfast, which is usually broccoli, mushrooms, onions, and an egg. That's kind of my breakfast routine. And then I came up and I started editing on one of my audiobooks, which I'm the voice talent for most of my audiobooks, and I need to get this one edited very soon. So I edited a couple chapters on that. Then I recorded a couple chapters on a different book that I'm working on. And then I wrote my newsletter, which went out about 15 minutes ago. So that's, and then I went shopping because, I'm the stay at home part of
we're not the only ones who work on Sunday. Yes, right.
So yeah, that's pretty much. Then I came home. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the writing part, would you say that you are a pantser or a planner? It sounds like maybe today was not a writing day, that you were doing other part of your author business work, which we totally understand. But when you are gearing up to write the book, are you a pantser or are you a planner?
Okay, so I'm a dyed-in-the-wool pantser. However, I have spent a lot of time and effort to understand different kinds of plotting techniques, just so that, I think it's important to know everything, right? Whether you choose to use it or not, the more you know, the better off you're going to be. So yeah, I'm what my assistant calls a tsunami writer, which I have tried my whole life to be more of like I'm going to get up, I'm going to write 1,325 words. And tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to write 1,325. I can't do that. Like, I get up and I will write 1,000 words. That's like my baseline goal. And most often I'll hit 1,500, 2,000. Sometimes when I'm getting close to the end of the book, I will hit 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 words in a day, depending on how deep in the project I am. But probably, I don't know, there are probably some writers out there who have the perfect system. This is not the perfect system for me. I keep trying to get better at it, and I keep trying to up my game. But generally speaking, I write about 1,500 words a day, even on Saturdays and Sundays. But just today, I haven't quite gotten around to it. Usually I write in the morning, but maybe today it's going to be in the evening.
It could be. speaking as somebody who's interviewed a lot of writers now for this podcast, no, I don't think there is a perfect writer with a perfect day out there anywhere.
The perfect writing system is the one that works for you. And
Yeah,
I just
there you
think
go.
that we have to be flexible because life happens and other work might take our attention away for a little bit. And the important thing is to keep coming back to it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Todd, we have to wrap this up, but one last question. What's next? You're ending Eldros.
Yeah.
You've done the nonfiction. What do we look forward to in the future?
Well, I have fans clamoring for more Tower of the Four. That was a series I started before I got into the Eldros Legacy project, and then the Eldros Legacy just took me away. It just swept me away, and I did 5 books in a row on that series. So now I'm coming back. I just finished the 3rd and the 4th and final in that series. I'm going to try and get a rough draft hammered out before the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. So that's my project that I'm working on next.
Sounds fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank
Enjoyed
you
it.
so much for having me. This was a blast.
Just a few parting words. Since I've already mentioned the newsletter, I should remind you again that WriterCon has its own free newsletter, which comes out every month, sometimes several times a month, and occasionally contains the WriterCon magazine as a free add-on. Plus, I sometimes put the podcasts in there and a wealth of information before we have time to get it into a podcast or on the WriterCon Facebook group. And it's free. So go to Substack, search for WriterConMag.com. No, WriterConMag.substack.com. I'll put it in the show notes. That's how you sign up. Let me also remind you, since we're in December now, there are some Christmas books other than the ones we mentioned before that you might want to take a look at. I wrote a Christmas novel a few years back called The Midnight Before Christmas, and it's one of my favorite books that I've ever written. Last year, I contributed to an anthology called Christmas Tapestry, which I thought was wonderful because each of the contributing authors did a Christmas story with their series characters. So I've got a Kinsey Rivera story in there, and the others are using their series characters. Lara, you've got a Christmas book too, don't you?
Christmas Spirit. Yep.
Part of the Wentland Files series?
It is. It's book 5, but if you start reading now, you're sure to be able to wrap it up by Christmas time.
Whip through 1 through 4 so that you can do 5 in time for Christmas.
Absolutely.
All right. Until next time, everybody, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. Bye-bye.